all elected or appointed board members are present. Mike Farnell is present via Zoom. Our student rep will be here at our regular meeting at the end of the month. Flag salute, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. Huge crowd. While it may appear that the board is moving quickly on important matters, there have been previous discussions on these issues either in person or either in previous meetings or board workshops and study sessions. Each director has had ample time to study the issues, ask appropriate questions, and obtain satisfactory answers from the superintendent and his staff or through outside research. If you would like to speak during our public comment period, you will need to indicate on the sign-in sheet. Remember, there is 3 minutes per person. Public comment period is the only time that the public is recognized to speak. This is not a time for dialogue between the board and the public, but rather an opportunity for the board to listen to individuals on educational issues, and board members are encouraged to listen attentively. The board chair or superintendent might ask a speaker a clarifying question or respond to a specific comment. If you have a specific question or issues that you would like the district to follow up on, please let us know. Finally, please remember that your words have impact, and you, not the school district, are responsible for your words. We ask that you help us model for our students what a respectful and inclusive community looks and sounds like. Richard Kinnison, you are first.
Alright, good evening everybody. Richard Kinnison here at Gold Bar. Got the 2 kids in the district, but we are in the process of getting ready to move. I wanted to let you all know I shot y'all an email earlier, right before the meeting. I did do a Healthy Youth survey run through for the 10th graders, and I sent you an email list of success areas that the district's doing well in, and some concern areas, some of them very serious, and I think should probably warrant a study session or discussion afterward to kind of take a round turn on to fix. But just as a brief rundown, since I only have 3 minutes, I'll cover some of the key takeaways. The most severe concern I have on there would be the one that was the most concerning and was the biggest serious difference between our district and others, was students having an extreme distrust in talking to staff and adults in the schools if they feel sad or hopeless compared to other school districts. One of the good things was it did show parents are more involved in our district than they are in other small districts statewide. Schools are doing well informing kids on drugs, weapons, alcohol, consent, and sexual relationships than other school districts, so that is a plus that we're doing things good there. And another big concern was there are a lot of students who wouldn't care if they moved away and wouldn't miss the area if they were forced to move. So I think that kind of tells kind of how they feel. There's multiple things, as you all know, with the Healthy Youth Survey that kind of go into that. But that was one of the big outliers on there. I'll let you look back at that email for the rest of the information. But since this is about contracts and funds and things of that nature, I'd like to talk about how while we have support staff who are being let go, removed, fired, reduced hours, I don't really think we should be awarding pay raises to administrative staff while we're losing support staff, because as we already know, based off of countless Healthy Youth surveys, that's an area of concern that's been there for a long time. So reducing the number of support staff to help these kids is not the right idea while we're giving pay raises to people, say in the district office or in administrative staffs who don't directly impact our students' well-being. The last thing would be the issue regarding the bond coming up. I hope this go around we learned from our mistakes last time and include the interest that's going to go along with that bond, so that the community and families are well informed. As we know, inflation's through the roof. People can't afford to do things. Including that interest, I think, would be a good start. Making sure you put all that information out there and they're transparent. I know we have people in the district who say, oh, well, this is how we've always done things. The district's failed for decades to pass a bond. So doing things the way we've always done them isn't the right way to continue doing it. I think now is the time to change things up a little bit. And as we were talking about earlier, we are in the process of selling our home. 2 of the families did not pursue specifically annotating Solon School District ratings and performance. So that was one of the things I wanted to let you all know that came from our realtor. Thank you.
Hey, Richard, follow-up question. Did
Yep.
you say you sent the email today?
Yes.
I see
It
it.
came right.
Yep.
I got it.
I sent it right before I came over here.
Yep.
Okay.
Before Jeff
forward it?
comes up, I'm gonna go ahead and address a couple of those. No staff has been let go. All staff that, received possible risks, are coming back to work. And raises, the state does, IPD, which is cost of living increases, so those aren't necessarily raises, they're cost of living. Jeff, you are next.
Greetings. Thank you, school board and administration, for allowing me to speak. I'm Jeff Festus, and I reside in Startup. And I just want to mention a couple of things. One is the word trust. If you just say one wrong word, you can definitely lose it for a while. Or if you even say the right thing at the wrong time, you can lose trust for a while. Richard mentioned contracts. I don't think anyone here is disputing that people don't deserve what they're getting paid or what they're getting offered. But perhaps in those contract negotiations and those offers, things like the stipends that they may get in addition, that could be offered to the public as well, so people know kind of overall what they're getting paid. And then I wanted to address what Richard said about the hopelessness. I know, even though I'm not at the district every day of the week, I know that I count as one caring adult who makes sure that I greet every student that comes to the middle school and let them know there's a caring adult that's glad to see them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, first item of business, we only have 3 today, is approval of resolution 24-03.
So want to introduce you to Corey Plater from DA Davidson. He's got a presentation to hopefully provide some, some depth to what it is we're doing and why. And Jim McNeil, who's the bond counsel that helps put the resolution together, and want to engage the board in discussion about the issue. So Corey, welcome.
Dan, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You guys hear him? Okay.
Dan, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
And will Kayla be presenting the materials, or would you like to make me a co-host and I can share it from my screen?
She's going to share the screen, and then I think it'll go up there, won't it, Kayla?
Yes. Corey, I just made you a panelist though, if you want to attempt to screen share so you can drive, if not, I can drive.
Whatever you prefer, I can go either way.
Yeah, let's have you try it first to see if you have the capability, as your panelist now. See if it works.
While Kayla is working on that adjustment to technology, just really thank you for the time on the agenda this evening to kind of frame this resolution. I know in the past we've talked about some of the basics of the bond, but I'd love to revisit some of the, there's the panelist.
Hey, Corey, just something to throw in there that was mentioned by one of the community members. I know you've talked quite a bit with this Jeff Heckathorn, and one of the topics you've talked about is the interest. Can you address that and how that's accounted for in the whole package?
Yeah, of course, happy to, and love to bring that up, and as we get to those slides as well. Kayla, I think you all can see me now and hopefully hear me. I'm still limited from screen sharing, so if you give me, I think, a co-host or another security credential, I can go even a little bit further here.
It looked like you just.
So, Dan, while we're getting that presentation up, I think the question of interest is a great question. I think a lot of us have experience with this when we buy our own homes. For example, we buy a $400,000 home and somebody asks, how much was your home? And you say 400. Rarely do we say 700,000, right? I mean, we're looking at nuance here. I think the district has every obligation and option to share those amounts, and we're happy to provide those for you. I have some of them that I can share when we get to that slide as well. One thing that I think Jim McNeil would probably caution of is whether or not that's something we can legally put on the resolution. I think when we see those numbers on a resolution, that actually gives board some discretion to issue more par bonds. So I'll defer to Jim on that when the resolution is held, but let me go ahead and dig in. Dan, thumbs up if you can see my materials. Perfect, great. So a quick refresher here. I know you've all had experience with education program and operations levies, capital levies. You have those right now and existing, but just wanted to put a few things in front of you that the EP&O levy must be renewed in 2026. So some would argue that attempting a bond with a little bit of leeway till that next model gives those voters a break, kind of lets you space these out. And of course, we've all know how critical those EP&O levies are for student progress and for extracurriculars and, you know, supplementing basic education. Your capital projects levy is also through 2026, and those be up to 6 years collection. But we're going to focus on, for the next 5 minutes or so, is the bonds, right? Bonds are for building up to 40 years maturity. 20 is the most common, and that's what we're going to show you tonight. Is the resolution that's in front of you is going to be based on a 20-year assumption. I thought it was a fun fact to share with you that the last bond was approved in 1998 for $2.4 million. $2.4 million went a heck of a lot further back in 1998 than it does today. That might only be like one HVAC unit for a small portable right now. Your debt capacity is $149 million. Another way to put that is, if the board was interested in doing as many projects as they could, with irregardless of what the tax rate would be, you could actually ask for $149 million. So you'll notice that the resolution in front of you is for about half of what your capacity is currently.
And that's principal, correct?
Correct, principal only. So what goes into a bond plan? There's really 4 factors. What are happening with interest rates? If anybody's been watching the last 2 days, the stock market has really struggled. There's this news of a possible recession. That actually is really helpful in the school bond world. Anytime there's fears of recession, there is kind of a flee to these fixed income, these bonds. Interest rates are actually much improved from the last time we ran numbers for you folks. The rating is essentially your credit score, and so we take into consideration what we think your credit score is going to be. You don't have a credit score right now, but we made a forecast that you'd be investment grade credit. Assess valuation, who pays the bills? How many taxpayers do you have? Your community is somewhat limited with your tax base because it's mostly homeowners, right? You don't have Boeing in your backyard or Microsoft or Amazon. So when you look at doing these projects, it falls on the backs of taxpayers that are your neighbors and not businesses mostly. So that is a challenge for most rural communities, that we need the support of people instead of business and some of those deeper pockets. And then structure. Structure is another way of saying, is it going to be a 30-year or a 20-year? Some people think about structure from the perspective of, I'm buying a car, I'll stretch that over 6 years instead of 30. I'm buying a house, that's a 30-year instead of a 6-year. So structure really matters when it comes down to that monthly or that yearly tax amount. Trying to find that sweet spot between an acceptable tax rate from the local citizen perspective and how much interest you're paying. If interest was the sole concern, we would go as short as possible. But if you go as short as possible, it's going to be the most expensive to taxpayers in that short window. And we'd love for people that are going to be able to use this building over a long period of time to be able to be the ones that pay for it. If you do it too short, there might be people that move into your community 10 years from now and don't have to pay for that building at all. So some people like to argue that the longer period of term makes it more equitable to those using your facilities. So that is a high level. So what are we really looking at currently on this assumption? And we've shifted to a November election and all our numbers from the previous February. There are some benefits to a November, and there's a couple things. One that's anecdotal. There's a lot of critics that say when schools run in a February time period that they're trying to hide from turnout. And I don't think they realize that February turnout's pretty good for school districts compared to any other election. They're really similar. The only election they're not similar to is a presidential November or a midterm November. Other than that, they're almost similar to all elections. However, the presidential election, the last time you guys had one, there's 85% turnout. Just recently, in the most recent February, you were at 31%. So you can see that running in November has, I think, two benefits. One is it kind of silences some critics that say you're hiding from turnout. And two, it's a really good survey to see what do people think about this measure? How supportive are people? Because we know that it's really hard to get people excited about voting, especially for tax measures. So that could be positive. This November, there are going to be a handful of school districts that are also looking at joining this election before that turnout to get a really good survey of their citizens. Districts like Meridian and Deer Park and Cheney are running bonds just slightly less than yours, between 55 and 70 million. Port Angeles, 140 million. And then it gets a little bit elevated. Lake Stevens to your south, 314 million. Same with Richland, 314 million. Auburn, 500 million. Sumner, 700 million. So when on a scale, you're right there in the middle. And there's also a couple schools running really small bonds, like $6 to $11 million amounts for either like a gym or a remodel. So you're not alone. There's going to be at least 10 other school districts on this November ballot. We also made the assumption that these sales would be split. So when we go to the market and we find investors for these bonds, we're not going to just say, you need 79 million, here it is all at once. We're going to think about the district and instead of paying interest for bonds that are just sitting in the bank, we're going to split these up into two sales. And we also use some conservative growth factors in our assumptions. 3% growth followed by 2% thereafter. When we look at your history, your 10-year average is 13% growth. Now, we don't want to assume massive amounts of growth and have it come in short, and then therefore you understated the tax rate. One of our goals at D.A. Davidson, because we work and live in the communities we serve, we have 15 offices in Washington State, is that we want to make sure that if a board adopts a resolution and there's a promised tax rate, that we meet or exceed those projections. So if we have a forecast of a certain rate, we would love it to come in a little under. So we use conservative assumptions in these factors, hoping that this rate is a ceiling. And we've proven that to be the case in the last 7 years that I've been working on bonds. What are market rates doing? Current market rates are, we just saw them plummet the last 2 days. One thing that we do is we put a cushion on these just in case rates turn around. Maybe the presidential election has some volatility right when you're trying to sell bonds, so we add a little bit of a buffer. So right now we're using 4.55% interest rate on the first sale, 4.89% on the second sale. This has a cushion in there. Many experts think that rates are only going to decline from here through the fall. If that's the case, then we're going to have a pretty robust cushion, and that means we're going to outperform these estimates. And just a friendly reminder, you look at this chart here, and for the last decade, we're pretty much right along the same line as where interest rates have been. So if you may have bought a car recently or a home mortgage, you see that rates are in the 7% range. Because these bonds are tax exempt, because you're a municipal entity, that you're going to be able to borrow at a rate less than that of somebody at Boeing or for a home loan. So right now we're forecasting, we're in the 4% range. We just did a bond in the last few weeks and we were in the high 3% range. So still a competitive rate, just not as low as it was during the pandemic, where you can see in that chart it really dipped down to almost 2%. Dan, any questions from you and the board before I show the scenario, kind of the grand finale slide?
Just talk a little bit about how you know, the interest rate thing is kind of a new piece to it. And when you talk about the cost of that, how do you account for that when you build this model? Because the interest is there. And you have to plan for that. It's not like it's something that just shows up all of a sudden. It is planned for it from the beginning.
Yeah,
But
correct. This is a forecast that our team, we have an expert who's had 40 years of experience at reading the market and forecasting what would be the interest level for a school district bond that's guaranteed by the state of Washington. And so it's a little bit of an art and a science, where we're using some analytics and we're also using some comps and some investor feedback. So these interest rate assumptions here we think are high, but that's using market data, and right now we're looking at the Federal Reserve probably making some reduction in interest rates, but this is a living, breathing, fluid thing. So if I was gonna show you rates in the previous year, we probably would have been in the 5% range.
So the question then, I guess, is, and it was mentioned by somebody in the audience that when they came in, is that how do you account for the interest that will be paid back? Like, use the home analogy.
Yes.
I've always told everybody how much the home was that I purchased, not the home and the interest. So I understood what you were saying. The adding the interest to it is kind of a new sort of thing that's come up, and it came up from that guy that I mentioned earlier. But how do you account for it in the model you build so people know that it's there the whole time? But you can't guarantee that you know exactly what it is until you lock in.
Yeah, interest rates are not guaranteed until they're locked in, but we do have some forecasts available that I'll share. So this is, I'm a visual learner, so instead of me putting up this huge chart, I want to put this, this huge table, I put up this chart, and it shows in green your actual EP&O tax rate over the last decade, and then also a forecast about 10 years into the future. And you'll notice what happened when the Cleary limited your tax from $3.50 down to $1.50, where you've been hovering since. It shows the old bond maturing back in 2017 in that tan color. And then you'll see that new capital levy, once McCleary was passed that limited you thought, well, we can't raise what we used to for the EP&O levy. This is our chance to maybe update some facilities so you can see the power of that capital levy. But today in 2024, your tax rate is $237. Just a little side note there, right now you are currently ranked 171st in the state for all school districts that have a local tax rate. So that means there's 170 other school districts in front of you that have a higher tax rate than Sultan. So you're not quite halfway, you're a little bit behind about halfway. So if people are concerned you have one of the highest tax rates in the state, when we compare you to other school districts, you're around 171st in the current year. But, Dan, the question is about interest. This plan, a November election for $79 million with 2 sales, conservative assumptions, is an 84-cent increase in 2025. That 84-cent increase, and then going in perpetuity for 20 years, and you see it moves a little bit when that capital levy matures, it goes up to $1 something, but the goal is a level tax rate. If you, based on this model, if you levy 84 cents next year, and after your capital levy matures, levy $1.63, that'll be everything that you need necessary to service the principal and interest on that bond. So while we show a $79 million bond on the resolution, it's possible the interest could be up to another $60 million on top of that for a total of $1.4 million, or $140 million, sorry. So you could have, for example, $140 million total principal and interest, but that is built into this model. So there's a lot of critics that say, you shouldn't be paying, $60 million in interest, but it's just the mechanism of how schools and how libraries and how parks and roads are done in our system is, if it wasn't done through a municipal bond, the state would have to step in and issue debt, and then the state would tax another manner to do these improvements. So it is kind of a necessary evil when it comes to doing improvements to facilities, and if you've seen a new library or other schools that have new facilities, they did also pay interest.
And there's just not another mechanism to do this.
There's state match, and so certain state match dollars can minimize that interest. If you start to qualify for certain state dollars, you could reduce this bond amount from $79 million perhaps.
And I think, last one was about 11 million, I think it's bumped up a little bit. So we do utilize that, SCAP, School Construction Assistance.
There's other funding mechanisms available for those school districts that are on tribal land, or that are on military bases. For example, you might see some of the Oak Harbor across the bay from you over there. But for the most part, this is the primary mechanism that school districts use to update facilities.
So our best response then would be if someone says, why aren't you telling us what the interest rate with the bond would be, that it's built in to whatever is in payback, and we really don't know what the interest rate's gonna be. Is there a better way to answer that question, or?
Yeah, I think, to be frank, we could use this slide here to share, we're forecasting 4.5% interest rate and then 4.89 as we look further to the future, because we have a cushion, a bigger cushion in the future. And then right now, I think I have a model that I could share with Dan and Daniel that shows a forecast of just approximately 60 million in interest, using these extremely conservative factors. If interest rates do not increase, if your AAV starts to boom with new construction, then that interest is very volatile. It could go down, and we don't know that number until you issue those bonds. But we do have a ballpark that we can share. It's usually fairly frustrating, I think, to many taxpayers when they see that number. And it's hard to put into perspective until you go back and retrospectively see maybe a car loan you've had personally or a home loan, because it does seem robust. But as I mentioned, these interest rates are still really competitive over the last decade.
So are there any school districts that do include interest in their bonds when they talk to the public or do presentations, or that you know of?
I think people do address the interest perspective in certain presentations in Q&As, but to my knowledge, and I know Jim can step in, I don't think it's legally allowed to put it into your resolution ballot language. It could be in the resolution per se, but not in the ballot that people see on there when they do their election.
Thank you.
So Corey, just quick look at this. We had the transition period when we ran it in February, and it looks to me like 25, 26 have improved from where we were. Is that accurate?
Correct. Because we're in the final 2 years of the capital projects levy, it was hard to get an overall level tax rate because interest rates in the front end were higher. We had an elevated yield curve, an inverted yield curve. And in addition, we were being more conservative when it came to capitalizing bond premium to use for your payment of principal and interest. So here's a position where, based on new market conditions, we're able to smooth out that transition. You'll notice two things, Dan, is on the front end that we've leveled it up, but on the tail end, it's more expensive. So we shifted some principal to the tail end to try and say, okay, taxpayers, if you like a predictable level interest rate or a tax rate, this is the model. The other one had a spike and then it dropped off and it leveled off. So this will be, I think
it was 335, now it's 338.
correct. And it was 359 in the beginning, so it was an additional 20-something cents to start, which would be $100 for an average $500,000 home. So it's, I think, fairly significant on the front end. So this makes it a little more predictable and level.
Board members?
I have a question. Hi, Mary Ann Neesland. Corey, can you explain first sale and second sale and what exactly that means, please?
Yeah, one example that I like to use is, I've never been in this position, but some people that I know have bought property to build a home, to just like a lot home or a custom home. And they'll get a loan for just the purchase of the property. Let's say they get a loan for $70,000, they buy the land. And then winter's over and it's spring, and now they do a second loan for materials and labor to begin construction. Instead of just doing one loan up front for the whole portion, they don't want to start paying interest when they won't be able to spend it that quickly or utilize it that quickly. So that's the same structure we're doing here. We're trying to align these two sales with when you'll need the money, so that you don't borrow more than you need and start paying interest right away. So that's the purpose of the two sales. By doing two sales, that actually kind of keeps the tax rate in check a little bit better as well. If we did one sale up front, give you the whole 79 million at one moment, you would see a tax rate spike up front. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Michael, any questions for him? Isaac? Mike, if you can hear me, do you have any questions for him? Take that as a no.
No questions.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
couldn't find my mute. No question.
Thanks. All right,
Dan, that's all I have. I'll stick around while Mr. McNeil speaks to the resolution or the board has any other questions. But thanks for the time, and I hope these visuals were helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
So we're switching over to
Jim
Jim
McNeil.
now.
Dan, can you hear me?
Sound
Great.
good.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. My role as the district's bond attorney is to prepare all the legal documents necessary to submit ballot measures to the voters. As you might remember, we do represent the district as special counsel in drafting all the levies and related finance matters, your budget adoption resolution, all those kinds of finance-related documents. And I'm here tonight just to briefly describe and discuss the bond election resolution under state law. In order to submit a ballot measure to the voters, the district must, the board must adopt a resolution that submits the measure to the voters and ultimately file it by tomorrow is the filing deadline for the November election. So not a lot of time, but want to just describe a little bit about the resolution. As you can see from your board packets, there's a lot of information contained in here. I want to express my appreciation to the district administration, to Dan, the two Dans, and just really appreciate all their work, as well as Clyde as well. So she's done a great job. The resolution really does a variety of different things, and I think what's interesting, we're talking about the interest component. Unlike your EPO levy, the ballot for your EPO levy actually has an estimated levy rate and a levy collection amount. And under state law, the ballot form must describe those items. For bonds, it's slightly different, and that is because we don't know exactly. We've got a good idea what the interest rate is going to be when you sell the bonds, but we're not exactly sure. And so this gives you the flexibility and also is consistent with state law. So you've got a maximum principal amount, and then you're authorized under state law to repay these bonds unlimited as to rate or amount. So there really is no limitation except for what you have communicated effectively to the voters, describing what you think it's going to cost them ultimately based on Corey's information. But again, these are unlimited tax general obligation bonds, meaning that you can levy any amounts necessary to repay these bonds sufficiently for investors to get their money back. So with that, the resolution, pretty straightforward. We tried to identify, and this is very similar, almost if not identical to what you saw for the February election. Obviously the change of dates for the election. We did lower the bond amount, and I'll let Dan speak to the rationale for why we reduced it by, I think, $280,000, Dan, was the number, because we took out a portion of the demolition costs. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was a demolition of the old transportation facility that was removed. So yeah, that was something we heard a lot about, so it was removed.
Right, so that reflects the new maximum par amount. And then we go through the most important pieces in the resolution are section 2 that describe the projects in detail. This section 2A through E really is the foundation for your use of bond proceeds. So we'll refer back to this repeatedly to make sure that you're spending the dollars as the voters have authorized and described in section 2A through E. I would also point out that really the next section that's important is section 9, which is really the form of the ballot. This is what the voters will actually see. This ballot, you're limited with certain word limits. You can't describe everything that you're going to use the bond proceeds for, and so as a result, we try to summarize the project descriptions from section 2 into the ballot. And specifically, state law requires that you identify the projects to be constructed, you identify the maximum principal amount of bonds, maximum maturity of each of the bonds, and then that you're going to levy excess taxes to repay those bonds, and then all is provided in the resolution. So that's really the essence of the resolution, is requesting that the voters get a chance to vote on this proposition as described in section 9. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have, or Dan, if you have anything else you want me to address, happy to do that.
Maybe follow up on Corey's question about including the interest in the resolution.
Yeah, we just typically do not do that. It's just too challenging to try to target what that interest might be, and if you start trying to limit, what you don't want to do is do something that's inconsistent with state law, and including the interest component would be inconsistent because, as I said, these these bonds are unlimited as to rate or amount, and so you're really authorized to collect taxes fully to repay these bonds in whatever is necessary to pay the debt service. So I've never seen it done in my 35 years of being a bond lawyer, so
Okay. You guys have any questions?
Michael, questions?
Afraid not, no.
Isaac?
No, I'm good.
Marianne?
No.
Mike?
No questions.
Thank you, Jim.
yeah, great, thank you.
Anything else, Dan?
Just discussion among the board before you take a vote.
I will start and say, we have a really strong individual that's going to lead the committee, that's not the school committee, but the communities committee to Sky Valley Citizens for Schools, that's really gung-ho and raring to go. Might be sitting right back there. So, that makes me feel better. Someone had mentioned something about this, we should wait for the city and their comprehensive plan. We talked to Russell, and there's no reason to wait. Nothing that they come out with would change anything anyway. I mean, we're overcrowded, we don't have room now, so there's no change that would be required if we waited. So I'm excited. I just want the community to have an opportunity to let us know. This is giving the community a chance to say, yes, we want this, or no, we don't.
Because I would, yeah, I'll let everybody answer. There's a couple of questions for the board.
Michael, comments or anything?
I mean, waiting for those numbers to come out, even if, we're not gonna find that we don't have more students. I mean, the only thing we might find is we have more coming than we expect. And I don't think that people will bear a larger burden and cost. I think this is a minimum step. I mean, to keep kids in school with enough space until we can build the next one, which hopefully will be quite a long time from now.
And if more people move in,
Yeah,
the tax
then
burden
Reduces
lessens,
and,
yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate, I get why people say like, why aren't you telling us the total cost? Well, if interest rates are unpredictable and we don't know how fast we're growing, that total cost is
And like you just said, that's not, it kind
It's
of goes
not
against the
against the
state.
law, yeah.
Yeah, that we should not do that, so.
Uh,
that's
it,
helpful.
it's probably something we should be upfront about, when we're talking to people, but that's not something, it's just not something that can go in, and it's not something we can promise, because interest rates aren't anything anyone can promise. Because the Fed's been promising to reduce rates for a while. Alright.
Isaac, anything?
I agree with, I was gonna say a lot when Michael just said,
I'm sorry, I took it all.
took it all.
So
Ditto. The numbers, I mean, it's stressful because it is just more, money that people are gonna have to pay, but I think it's, walking around this place, it just needs it. It will help fix the issues even at this elementary with all the portable baths. I mean, it's just a no-brainer right now, unfortunately. I got nothing else.
Marianne?
Based on the financial outlook right now, the economy, it's gonna be a struggle for November. I will let the voters decide.
That's the best way to do it, let them decide and let us know. Mike, did you have anything to add? Or should I call you iPhone?
No, I think it's been covered. I'm a support for running as soon as we possibly can and try to get this passed.
Dan, do you have anything to add?
Thanks.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. All board members recognize we have a space problem. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Absolutely,
Do
yes.
you recognize this as
100%.
something that is, will help strengthen the community? It's about the community, it's about our schools and the community.
Yes.
One of the things that, as we gathered information after the February one, is that we got a lot of criticism for avoiding November. Interestingly, I've also heard in some of those circles that they don't want November now, so I don't know what to say. I think the space problem is such that you have to let the voters decide. The costing that I worked on with the costing group is such that that breaking ground would be in January of 2026. So it's out a ways. But you have to understand the design work, all the soft costs, which is about 40% of that overall cost. It takes a while to do all that stuff. And so it's not something you just start the next month. And so if a later date were to come, you have to push all that out. And that's what the cost is kind of based on. And so, you know, there's a lot of new citizens that reside in Sultan that, you know, want to support what's happening, because they have lots of young kids, and there's a lot of citizens that have lived here for many years that want to support. We'll see what happens, but it's ultimately the board's choice. Our space problem, even if not one more house is built, we have a space problem.
I think we're good. We can move forward. Can I get a motion to approve resolution 24-03?
My motion to
Approve.
approve of the resolution 24-03.
And it's gonna be a roll call vote, so we'll go one at a time. Mike Farnell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Michael, how do you vote?
Aye.
Isaac, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mary Ann, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, guys. All right, the next one is approval of the pro-con statement committee members. I know that we have Dion Johnson, Marcy Osborne, and Ingrid Wallace have agreed to do the pro committee. And we have no con, correct?
I don't know. It was put out the same way.
Okay. And it does say if the district is unable to find at least one person to appoint the committee, Snohomish County Elections will attempt to find interested persons and appoint them to the committee. So we just need to approve this, correct?
Yes, and just want to recognize, just so people know, Ingrid Wallace and Dion Johnson are here. Marcy couldn't make it. She is with football practice with her kids, so.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Very much so.
Yeah. So can I get a motion to approve the pro statement committee members?
Motion to approve the pro state committee members.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Who made the motion?
Michael.
Michael, who seconded? Or did
We're
we-
not doing that yet, yeah. Okay, so thank you guys, that's a lot of info, and thanks to the two presenters, that was great. So now we have approval of tabled non-representative
Thank you,
contracts.
Corey. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
The contracts are what we all have had discussions about, and I don't think Michael, do you have any questions? Kind of gone over all of them. Isaac?
No.
Mary Ann?
No.
Mike?
I think we might have lost him, but just give me a second, sorry.
And just, the contracts have been gone over, multiple times, so they're ready now. Do we wanna wait for him, is he?
He's not on it.
Hold on, I acknowledged, I lost him, he said, I'm just trying to, cause I restarted the meeting, so I should be on.
We just have this one last vote, so if he doesn't come back, then we still have the quorum, so.
Okay, Mike, can you hear us okay?
I'm here now. I got back.
Thank you, sorry about that, Gigi, if you wanna do a quick recap.
Okay, so we are, approval of tabled non-representative contracts for school year 24-25. None of us had questions because we've all gone over them, we've all seen them. Did you have any questions, Mike? Okay,
All right, we'll unmute. The only question I had, and I talked with Dan about it earlier, was just the HR contract. And I just want to make sure that whomever we hire is not somebody who needs work to perform the duties, that somebody gets right out of the bat that can perform those duties.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve tabled non-representative contracts for school year 24-25?
Motion to approve tabled representative contracts for school year 24-25.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. That is it. We don't have executive session. Did you?
No, you gotta
Oh, wait.
approve the salary for the HR. We took it out of the
Oh,
contract.
okay.
It's its own standalone.
I'm reading my old agenda. So, does anyone have questions on that?
I'm trying to find my desk.
And my YouTube.
So if you have any background, it was based on some comparable districts, and you saw that, you saw where it's at.
Yeah.
So you can see that,
It's not cheap.
when you compare us to Granite Falls, we're competitive. If you compare us to other places, not as much. And that's always a careful balance because, as they stated earlier, we live in a community that's homes. At the same time, we have people that travel to us through lots of zip codes where the pay is a lot higher. And so you have to balance that correctly and responsibly, and I think this sets that at that level.
Yeah, looking at the pay rates, yeah, a lot of districts around us pay way more than we're paying. I do think, maybe it was Mike I was talking to, but maybe doing a workshop or something to
Yes.
go over, so we can set our ranges and update our salary ranges, so that we're, we look at everybody else's and see where they're at and see if ours need to be updated at all. Might be a good workshop topic.
And that would mostly be your non-represented. I think
Yeah.
some of the other ones have been addressed, but we need to figure out what those things are.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve Director of Human Resource salary for school year 24-25?
I motion to approve the Director of Human Resources salary for the school year 24-25.
All in favor? Aye.
I'm abstaining
Aye.
because mine does not have the schedule for HR at all.
Well, there's not a schedule, there's not a high and a low, there's one salary.
There's one salary number.
And that's,
Gotcha, okay.
there's no, and that's where it was based on doing a little, a deeper dive, because we were so far below,
Gotcha.
and that's.
And that's why I
why
just
we-
said, maybe we can do a workshop where we do salary ranges for the ones that don't have salary
Thank
ranges.
you, that would be perfect. Yes, so approved.
Okay, Mike, did you, aye?
Yes, I was aye.
Thank you, motion carries. No executive session, superintendent, anything?
No, I just want to thank the board for careful deliberation. I want to thank the audience for commenting. These are hard issues, and
Let the community decide.
we've got to, those of us that work here are lucky and blessed enough to be able to be here for a while, but honestly, it's an investment for the community that will go well beyond the current employees.
And if anyone's interested in helping out with the